Those of you who came to today's worship, in spite of our morning storm, you are especially blessed because we have not just a guest speaker, special guest speaker. Yes, I don't use that word special randomly or frequently. Pastor Nick Burleson and his wife Joanna, they planted a church in Stephenville, Timber Ridge, years ago. They served there for 12 years. And I heard that that small church, planted during the 12 years, 42 churches across the nation and then further places. So you might, I'm not sure, but he might share some of them. It's an incredible story. So he is, not many local churches does something like that. The Texas Baptist noticed his leadership and the fruit. They invite him to be a church planting specialist. And then, still serving and helping a Texas Baptist. And then just a couple weeks ago, he became also interim pastor of FPC Plano, our host church and the sister church, big sister church. And we are praying for. And so we are really blessed to have him today. And so, and then Joanna, and I hope you not only listen to them, he said that we are reminded him of his old church in Stephenville. So please talk to them, ask them, all the questions that you have, please give to them later. All right, let's welcome Pastor Nick.
Today, I hope you realize you have a great church. I get to go to church plants and new churches and all over the state on a normal basis. And I get to worship with them, and I get to be a part of what they're doing, and I get to hear stories about what's going on at churches. And this is a great church, and I hope you realize that. I hope you don't take it for granted. It reminds us a ton of the church that we planted in Stephenville. There were tons of young adults and families in that church, and we had the opportunity to be a part of that for 12 years, and God blessed us in an incredible way. And so we get to see a lot of churches, and we know good churches when we see them, and this is a great church. And so I hope you don't take that for granted, and you have a great pastor. Can you join me in honoring Pastor Paul, your leader, and what he has done here as he has shepherded and led this church? I'm so honored to be with you today. I brought with me one of my favorite keepsakes. You are familiar with the term keepsake. It's something that someone gave you that you hold on to simply because of the person who gave it to you. And I hold on to this little pocket knife right here. This little pocket knife, I don't carry it every day. It typically stays in a safe spot in our home because it's one of the most important things in my life. And it's not fancy. It's not worth a whole lot. The brand of it is rubbed off. It's kind of a cheap one. If you see on the back, you can see that pieces have fallen off of it. But this pocket knife was carried by my grandfather. It was carried by my grandfather, and before he passed away, he was my best friend. He was my mentor. I actually, Pastor Paul got to lead him to Christ and baptize him when he was almost 70 years old. And he is who I've patterned so much of my life after. He was an incredible leader, an incredible man. And when he was about to pass away, he gave me this. He said, "I want you to have this." It was the pocket knife he carried every day. It sat on the table next to his recliner at night, and in the morning he would put it back in his pocket. And if you were to go to a pawn shop, they wouldn't give you any money for it. If you were to try to sell it on Facebook Marketplace, you're not getting $2 for it. But to me, it means the world simply because of who gave it to me. You probably have a keepsake. Maybe it's an old pan that a grandmother used. Maybe it's a hat that a grandfather passed down. Maybe it's a family photo of family members who've gone on to be with the Lord. You have some kind of keepsake that you hold on to simply because someone gave it to you. Isn't that a wild thought? That one day someone will hold on to a frying pan because it was your frying pan. that one day someone will have a hat in their closet and they'll never wear it, but they'll simply hold on to that hat because it was the hat that you wore. You know, keepsakes, they mean so much to us, not because of what they are, but because of who and what they represent. It's who they represent, it's what they represent that gives them value. It's that they were passed down to us from who they were passed down that holds all the worth. Today we're going to talk about what it means to live our life poured out, to pass down a legacy to generations. In the Bible, in Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22, the Bible says this. It says, a good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. The writer of Proverbs says a godly person, a good person, is a person who is thinking about the impact they make, not just for their children, but for their children's children. That a godly person leaves something behind for generations to come. Now, two things I want to point out about this. Number one is that when it talks about an inheritance, we automatically in Western culture are tempted to think wealth. But inheritance is far bigger than wealth. Inheritance has to do with faith. It has to do with character. It has to do with integrity. It has to do with morals. And so what the Bible is saying is that a good person, a godly person, leaves something behind for the people that come after them. He or she leaves something in things of faith and things of morals and things of character for the generations that come after them. Here's the second thing I want to point out. I know there's a lot of people in the room that you are younger, and you're maybe thinking about getting married. You're maybe thinking you're newly married and you're maybe thinking about having kids. I love the prayer that we just prayed for those who are newly married and for the families, including those in the prayer. And maybe you're at that stage in life. Maybe you're like, I'm just trying to find a full-time job, right? I'm just trying to, I'm not thinking about an inheritance. I'm not thinking about a legacy. Here's what I would challenge you with this morning. The very best time to think about leaving a legacy is before you're at the end of your life. It's too late when you get to the end of your life and go, what will my legacy be? The best time to ask that question is when you have a chance to live a life that actually leaves a legacy. It's the best time to think about the impact that your life long-term will make, because no matter what age or stage or season of life you're in, we all ought to be asking, what kind of faith legacy do I want to leave to the world around me? Because here's the truth. You're leaving a legacy whether you realize it or not. It's not optional. You are leaving some kind of legacy. By the way you lived this week, you left footprints and imprints of a legacy to the people you work with, to your friends, to your neighbors, to the way you treat the waiter at the restaurant on a Friday night leaves an imprint, a footprint, a piece of a legacy. So it's not optional, but sometimes it's not intentional. And so what we want to talk about today is how do we leave an intentional legacy of faith? How do we live intentionally on purpose for the kingdom of God so that it impacts the next generation and the world around us? How do we live in such a way? How do I live in such a way that my children's children's children will walk with Jesus because of the way I live? How do you make sure that generations that follow you follow Jesus because they followed you? That's the question of a legacy. And so we're going to dive in to 2 Timothy this afternoon. If you have a Bible, open it up to 2 Timothy chapter 4, or go on your app to 2 Timothy chapter 4, or you can follow along on the screen behind me. We're going to look at a letter that a guy named Paul wrote to his young son in the faith, Timothy, about this thing called legacy. If you're new to church or new to the Bible's divided up into two sections: the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is a record of the movement of God before the coming of his son Jesus into the world. And everything in the Old Testament points forward that one day God's going to send a rescuer to rescue people from their sins. The New Testament is the story of the rescuer. the Messiah, the Son of God. His name is Jesus. And the New Testament records his birth, his life, his death on a cross, his resurrection. That means he came back to life, and the beginnings of his early church. The book of 2 Timothy is part of that beginnings of the early church of Jesus. It's written by a guy named Paul, who was a church planter, who was a pastor, who would go from city to city and start new churches and raise up leaders and hand those churches off to those leaders and then go start another church. And he's writing this letter to one of his sons in the faith named Timothy. Paul is at the very end of his life. He knows that his days are numbered. He knows that his life is almost over. And here are his words to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4, starting in verse 6. He says, "For I'm already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time of my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who long for his appearing." As Paul is reflecting on his life, at the end of his life, he's not sad that his life is over. He's not sad at the end of his life because of how he lived his life. Paul talks about how he knows he has left a spiritual legacy. He knows that he has left something of the faith behind for generations to come. What Paul is saying is that I know my life was poured out to matter. I know my life was poured out to matter. And that's what we're going to dive into today, Paul's words. And as we talk about a life poured out for a legacy. Paul says three things in this passage. A life poured out for a legacy. Paul says three things. The first thing he says is this: fight the good fight. That's what he says in verse 7. He says, I have fought the good fight. If you want to leave a legacy with your life, you got to fight the good fight. That's what Paul says he did. He said he's leaving a legacy because he fought the good fight. We know how to fight, don't we? We're good at fighting. We live in a culture and we live in a society where we're fantastic at fighting, amazing at arguing, dazzling at disagreements, and confident in conflicts. That's what we are. We have fighting down. Give us a family and we can make a fight. Give us a friendship and we can make a fight. Give us a coworker and we can make a fight. And then we go online onto social media, and we specialize in fighting. As people, we know how to fight. We fight every day. Sometimes we're fighting with people, a coworker, or fighting over politics with someone who we disagree with. So sometimes we're fighting for something. Maybe we're fighting for a promotion, or something's going on with our family, and we're fighting for our family. Sometimes we're fighting against something. Maybe we're fighting against a bad health diagnosis or a challenge in our work. We fight every single day. It's easy to fight, but here's the question this afternoon. Are you fighting the good fight? Anybody can fight, but are you fighting the good fight? That's what Paul says. He says, you got to fight the good fight. That's what Paul says he did. He says, I fought the good fight. Well, what does it mean to fight the good fight? What is Paul talking about? Well, if you go back and read in Paul's writing to different churches, as he would write these letters to remind these churches how to live in such a way that follow Jesus, if you go back and read Paul's writing in the Bible, he shows us what the good fight is. In his letter to the church at Colossae, in Colossians chapter 3, verse 2, he says, set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. Don't fight for the things on earth. Fight for something greater than that. In Philippians, to the church at Philippi, in Philippians 3, verse 13 and 14, he says, but one thing I do, forgetting what's behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. He's saying, fight for God's calling. Fight for what God has called you to. Fight for the prize of heaven. Don't get caught up in the things of this world. Forget about that stuff and strive toward fighting for heavenly things. In 1 Timothy, the first letter he wrote to Timothy, in chapter 6, verse 12, Paul simply says, fight the good fight of the faith. Fight the good fight of the faith. When Paul says fight the good fight, he's talking about the God fight. That's the good fight. The good fight is the God fight. It's the faith fight. It's when we fight and we battle to live out the mission of Jesus and his calling on our lives. It's when we want to act a certain way because someone's wronged us. And instead we choose to forgive because that's the calling of Jesus on our life. It's when we want to do a certain thing with our life, but we know God has called us to do something different. So we fight to follow and be obedient because we know God's put a calling on our life. It's when we want to do our own thing and we want to spend our time and our talent building up ourselves, but instead we choose to use our time and our talent to serve the local church because we know that that's what Jesus has called us to do. So we fight the good fight. The good fight is the God fight. Too many times, those of us who follow Jesus, we fight the distracting fight. Even in the church, we fight the distracting fight. We find ourselves fighting with each other. We find ourselves arguing over things that don't matter. We're really good at fighting over secondary allegiances that are lower than the mission of Jesus and the cross of Christ. And what all of those things do is they distract us as followers of Jesus from the good fight. They distract us from the mission of Jesus that we're called to live out and we're called to move forward. They distract us from loving our neighbor and sharing the truth and hope of Jesus with a broken and hurting world. And so the question for us today is this: who are we fighting today? Are we fighting the God fight? My wife and I started a nonprofit back in 2000 called the Revive Initiative. And we provide retreats for pastors and ministry leaders who are tired and just need a few days to get away. And so we take pastors out 6 to 10 at a time, or couples out 4 or 5 at a time, to lake houses on Lake Tawakoni east of Dallas. And we have jet skis and pontoon boats and all of those things. And we go fishing and we ride jet skis, and pastors take naps. And there's no agenda at these retreats other than for pastors to be able to catch their breath and breathe. We feed them good food and we pray for them. And then every retreat that we have, at least one night on the retreat, we just sit around the campfire and we pray for one another. And typically when we get done praying for one another, we'll have a time where people just start sharing stories. And they start sharing their battle scars, Pastor Paul of ministry. And they start talking about the battles they've been through in ministry. And I never walk away from that campfire not shocked about some of the things that people share and how they've battled to fight for what God has called them to do. I got to thinking about that this week. I wonder if there will be campfires in heaven that we sit around and we tell our faith stories to each other. That we sit around heaven's campfire and we talk about how we fought the good fight. And I wonder what our heavenly campfire story would be. Can you imagine sitting around heaven's campfire and saying, oh, you guys aren't going to believe this. I fought so hard to fill my bank account. I got 70 years on that planet, and I just fought really hard to have a big bank account when I was done. Or man, I fought so hard to get people to like my political candidate. I thought he or she was gonna be the salvation for our nation. So I just fought so hard to get people to line up with my political ideology. Or you know what? I fought so hard. There was this thing in my day on earth. There was this thing called Instagram and TikTok, and I fought so hard to get likes and follows because I really fought to be an influencer. Or might it be in my 40s, marriage got really hard, and I fought to keep it. I got an opportunity to go on a mission trip, and I was terrified to go halfway around the world. But I went anyway, and it changed the trajectory of my faith. I was given an opportunity to serve, and I didn't feel like I had the talent. I didn't feel like I could measure up, but I fought and I followed God anyway, and God used me to impact the lives of people. I had a plan for my life. I went to college and I got a degree and I had a plan for my life, but God called me to do something else. And so I fought to not be afraid. I fought fear and I followed His plan instead of my own. Fight the God fight, the good fight for the mission of Jesus and for the sake of His kingdom so that you can live a legacy with your life. Paul says, fight the good fight. The second thing he says is this. He says, run your race. Paul says, I have finished the race. That's the second thing he says in verse 7. I have finished the race. Look at the person next to you and say, run your race. Run your race. Say, don't run their race. Look at him. Say, don't run their race. Run your race. Paul looks back on his life and with full confidence, he tells Timothy, I have finished my race. He says, I've completed the race, Timothy. Can you imagine being at the end of your life and being so confident in the way that you follow Jesus that you could look at the people around you and say, you don't have to worry about me. I ran the race God gave me. I have finished. I've crossed the finish line. I've done everything that God has called and commanded me to do. And it's with that confidence that Paul looks at this son in the faith and he says, Timothy, I didn't give up. I didn't let up. I didn't quit. I ran through the finish line and I ran my race. Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1 in the Bible says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. The writer of Hebrews says, run your race. Don't get tripped up by sin. Don't get entangled by the things of this world that easily trip us up. He says, and oh, by the way, remember, you've got a whole crowd of folks cheering you on from above. You're surrounded by a crowd of witnesses. They are in the bleachers of heaven and they are cheering for you. Excuse me. And they are cheering for me and they are cheering us on to run our race. He says, don't get caught up in the things of this world. Don't get entangled in the sin that so easily trips up so many people. Remember, you've got a cheering section in heaven and the bleachers are full and they're encouraging you. They're cheering you on to run your race. My sister-in-law, before she retired, was a very accomplished and successful track and cross-country coach. She coached at Kingwood down in Houston, one of the most recognized cross-country and track women's programs in the nation. She's a multiple-time state champion, Nike national champion. Her teams have run in Oregon multiple times at national championship relays. And she coached specifically distance runners. And so when we were younger, we would go to the state track meet at University of Texas down in Austin, and we would watch her teams compete. And we would always try to sit near the finish line so that we could see the end of the race. And here's the thing about distance races. When people are running distance races, when they're running 800, when they're running a mile, when they're running a 2 mile, at the end of the race, anyone who's coaching the race and anyone who's a fan of distance racing knows that at the end of the race, you're cheering your person on and everybody yells the same thing. Whatever your runner's name is, you yell at them and you yell this. You yell, kick, kick, kick. Everybody in the stands is yelling, Paul, kick, kick, kick. Johanna, kick, kick, kick. And you're cheering your person on and you're yelling, kick, kick, kick. You see, when a track coach, that's a track terminology. And when a track coach yells kick during a race, what they're doing is they're urging the runner to increase their speed immediately to keep their form and increase their speed to a high-intensity push through the finish line. And what they do when a coach starts yelling this or when a fan starts yelling this, they're telling that runner, you're almost to the finish line. Don't quit now. Don't stop now. Use every bit of energy you have. Use every bit of effort you have. You're almost there. Don't stop now. And what Paul is saying is that we got to run our race because there are generations in heaven who are cheering us on, going, kick, kick, kick. You can beat that temptation. Kick, kick, kick. Through the power of Jesus, you can overcome it. Kick, kick, kick. Don't give up on your family. Stay with it. Work it out. Learn to forgive. Go to counseling. See a therapist. Talk with a pastor. Kick, kick, kick. Don't give up on that calling that God placed in you that you think He's forgot about. It's still there. Kick, kick, kick. And we have a cloud of witnesses in heaven who are saying, you got to run your race. You got to kick. You got to finish strong because the kingdom needs people who will run through the finish line. It's easy to start following Jesus. It's hard to finish. And the world needs to see people who are finishing strong when it comes to following Jesus. And we have a cloud of witnesses who are saying, run your race. Kick, kick, kick. And it's not only a cloud of witnesses in heaven. You have a cloud of witnesses on earth. Everyone in this room has someone they know who's not here today who knows you're here today. They're not here today because they don't do the Jesus thing. They don't believe in the Jesus thing. They don't do the church thing. But they know you're here today because you do the Jesus thing. You do the church thing. You're on a journey of faith. They need to see you run your race. Your coworker desperately needs to see you run your race. Your neighbor, they need to see you run your race. Your kids, they need to see you run your race. The people that you interact with on a daily basis, they need to see you run your race. Because you are showing them what the hope and grace and love of Jesus looks like. And God is yelling from heaven, run your race. Finish your race. Paul writes this letter to young Timothy, and he's like, I'm content. I've done what Jesus has called me to do because I've fought the good fight and I've run the race. He says one more thing in verse 7. He says this. He says, I've kept the faith. You got to keep the faith. You got to keep the faith. Paul says, I've kept the faith. At the end of his life, he looks back over his journey. He looks back over his life and all that God has called him to do. And he makes this declaration, I've kept the faith. And that's something to be celebrated. Because when it comes to following Jesus, it's easy to get it off to a hot start and cool down in the end. It's easy to get off to a hot start because we're so passionate about what Jesus has done in our life and He's changed us and we get off to a hot start. But as humans, we have a proclivity to comfort. Think about it. When you came to Christ, if you're a follower of Jesus in this room, I know not everybody's a follower of Jesus. If you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus and you're just checking out the whole church thing, the whole Jesus thing, I want you to know that I have the utmost admiration for you being here today. The courage it takes to come to a place that's going to sing about Jesus and talk about Jesus and you're really not even sure about Jesus, the courage it takes to do that is incredible. And I want you to know that you're one of my heroes for being here today if that's you. But for those of us who are followers of Jesus, we know that there are times where we can come to Christ with incredible passion and zeal, and we want the whole world to know that Jesus changed our lives. But somehow it's easy for us through the years to get distracted along the way by the wrong things. It's human nature that as we grow older, we have a proclivity to be more comfortable. When we were young, we loved camping in a tent. Now we don't even like the bed at a 4-star hotel. We want our own bed, right? When we were young, we would go do all of these crazy things, all of these crazy activities. Now, a crazy day is like, give me my lazy boy and the NBA Finals on the big screen TV, right? We want to change the world. We just want to do it from the comfort of our couch. It's human nature that the older we get, the more we want comfort. So let me ask you this question this afternoon. Are you living more faith-filled now than you were a year ago? Are you living more faith-filled now than you were 5 years ago? Are you living more faith-filled now than you were a decade ago? What would it look like if you and I were living every single day walking with Jesus at this point in our life? We have 2 kids. We have a son who is going to be a junior in high school and a daughter who's going to be an 8th grader in junior high. And Johanna is an incredible, amazing mom. She's a great parent, and I am a parent. I'm along for the ride. But one of the things that I've really tried to instill in our kids is a go-for-it mentality. I want them to just go for it. I'll say things to them on a regular basis, like when they ask me, Dad, do you think this person would do this if I asked them? I'll say, well, the answer is always no until you ask. I've said that to our kids hundreds of times. That the answer is always no until you ask. Or they'll ask me about something. Our daughter, about 2 years ago, asked us, do you think I should go out for cheerleader? I want to go out for cheerleader, but I don't know if I should. And I was like, well, here's the thing. If you try out and they say no, you aren't a cheerleader. But you're not a cheerleader now, so nothing has changed. But if you try out and they say yes, then you are a cheerleader, and everything has changed. So go for it. I've just tried to instill this go for it. Just try it. Just go for it. By the way, she did go for it. And yesterday, she got selected as an All-American UCA cheerleader as an 8th grader because she went for it, right? You got to go for it. And we've tried to instill that in our kids. I want you to understand this today. Jesus is a go-for-it God. Jesus is a go-for-it God. The mission of Jesus is a go-for-it mission. We have a go-for-it faith. You're thinking about sharing your faith with your neighbor? You know what Jesus would say? Go for it. You think about giving generously to the kingdom in a crazy way that doesn't even make sense with your bank account? Jesus would say, go for it. Thinking about using your talent to serve on a ministry team? Jesus would say, go for it. You thinking about taking that mission trip to the other side of the world? Jesus would say, go for it. You thinking about giving up your plan for your life and following some crazy plan that God has planted in your heart that doesn't even make sense? Jesus would say, go for it, because Jesus is a go for it God who gave us a go-for-it mission. That's what our faith is. It is a go-for-it faith. What if our faith got more risky and more bold as we got older instead of less risky and less bold? What if the longer we followed Jesus, the more risks we took? What if the longer we walked with Jesus, the more we trusted that He won't fail us and He really won't let us down? What if the more years we had in walking with Jesus and in following Him, we actually grew in our trust in Him and took more risk and took more radical steps of faith? And what Paul says at the end of his life is he writes this letter to Timothy, and he says, Timothy, I did not choose comfort. I was jailed, I was beaten, I was persecuted. I kept the faith. Keep the faith. And so at the end of his life, he writes this letter to young Timothy. He says, Timothy, if you want to make it to the end of the race, if you want to make it for the long haul, if you want to leave a legacy, Timothy, it's not lost on me that Paul is writing to his spiritual son. The reason Timothy is a follower of Jesus is because Paul fought the good fight. The reason Timothy is a follower of Jesus is because Paul ran the race. The reason Timothy is a follower of Jesus is because Paul kept the faith. In fact, there's another verse in Timothy. I'm not going to show it on the screen. I didn't prepare it for the notes, but Paul is talking to Timothy, and he says, what I entrusted to you and other faithful leaders, pass on to other reliable teachers who will pass it on to next generations. Paul's talking about his great-great-grandchildren in that passage. his spiritual great-great-grandchildren. He knows how he's lived his life in front of Timothy. And he's writing to Timothy and saying, if you want this kind of impact too, Timothy, if you want to live a life that leaves an inheritance to the next generation, if you want to live a life that leaves a legacy, if you want to get to heaven and you want to be surrounded by people that say, I'm here because of you, then here's how you do it. You fight the good fight. You run your race. You keep the faith. I'll share with you a picture and a story, and then we're done today. We love to vacation in Colorado. My family does. We've been very blessed. We have a friend who owns a home very close to Rocky Mountain National Park. And for the last decade, they've allowed us to use that home anytime we want. It's an incredible blessing. We actually are in their home more than they live in Texas. They use it as a second home. We're in their home more than they are. I'm the kind of guy that if you say, hey, we have a vacation home, you should use it sometime, I'm coming to the house, okay? I'm using it. I'm going to be there every single time. I'm going to use it until you tell me, hey, this isn't your house, go home. That's the kind of guy I am. So we go to Colorado a lot, and we have fallen in love with Rocky Mountain National Park. And everywhere in Rocky Mountain National Park, there are hiking trails. I know I don't look like a hiker. I'm not a hiker. But my wife loves to hike, so we go on some family hikes. My son, myself, and my daughter, we complain about it the whole time. But you can see her shaking her head. But we go on family hikes. And on all of the hiking trails in Rocky Mountain National Park, there's the same sign. It's the Leave No Trace sign. Now, it may be packaged in different ways. They have a lot of different leave no trace signs, but at the beginning of every trail, it says leave no trace. Whatever you take with you, bring out, and make sure that this trail looks like you were never here. That is some great advice for preserving our nation's national parks. And that is some terrible advice for those of us who would claim to follow Jesus. Leave a trace. Leave a trace. We can't leave a legacy in comfort and cruise control. It will cost us something. But here's the thing. You get one shot. And some of you are really young and you think life will last forever. It goes by fast. Doesn't it, Pastor? It goes by fast. You got one shot. It goes by really quick. Yesterday, I was 21 at Howard Payne University in Brownwood. Today, I'm approaching 50, and my back hurts, and my knees hurt, and my shoulder hurts when I get out of bed every single morning. And it was just yesterday that I could eat whatever I wanted yesterday. And today, if I look at a donut, I need to make 3 doctor's appointments. It goes by fast, and you got one shot. Leave a trace. It goes by quick and you get one shot at making an impact. Don't waste your life on the things of this world. Live for the mission of Jesus. Fight the good fight. Run your race. Keep the faith. Because in one day in heaven you might be sitting around a campfire. I don't know how theologically that accurate that is. But you might be sitting around a campfire. And what are you going to say? Oh man, I had a nice house, had a cool car, had a great country club membership. Or will you say, I fought the good fight. I ran the race. I kept the faith. And I left a legacy for generations for the name and fame and glory of Jesus. Let's pray. Jesus, help us not to waste our life. Help us not to spend our one and only God-given ride on this planet for the things of this world that will fade away and are temporary. But help us to fight the good fight. Help us to run our race. Help us to keep the faith so that generations who follow us might follow you because they followed us. That's our prayer this morning, Jesus. We ask it in your name.